Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Parudikacharya Ashtoto to Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Parudikacharya Ashtoto to Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavanda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Śrīmad-Bhāgavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 5th day of December 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 9 entitled The Most Confidential Knowledge, text number 14 on page 395. Unless you have one of the other books, the special books. Okay, everyone's right. Satatam kirtiyanto mam yatantash chadvidhavataha namasyantash chamam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate satatam kirtiyanto mam yatantash chadvidhavataha namasyantash chamam bhaktya nityayukta upasate satatam kirtiyanto mam yatantash chadvidhavataha namasyantash chamam bhaktya nityayukta upasate satatam kirtiyanto mam yatantash chadvidhavataha namasyantash chamam bhaktya nityayukta upasate. Kunji, you want to try? No? No? Okay. Who? You want to try? Go ahead. Satatam kirtiyanto mam yatantash chadvidhavataha namasyantash chamam bhaktya nityayukta upasate. Go ahead, Saul. Satatam kirtiyanto mam yatantash chadvidhavataha namasyantash chamam bhaktya nityayukta upasate. Satatam kirtiyanto mam yatantash chadvidhavataha namasyantash chamam bhaktya nityayukta upasate. Anyone else? Satatam, always, kirtiyantaha, chanting, mam, about me, yatantaha, fully endeavoring, cha, also, drida vrataha, with determination, namasyantaha, offering obeisances, cha, and, mam, me, bhaktya, in devotion, nityayukta, perpetually engaged, upasate, worship. Translation. Krishna says to Arjuna, always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me, these great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. Purport. The mahātmā cannot be manufactured by rubber stamping an ordinary man. His symptoms are described here. A mahātmā is always engaged in chanting the glories of the Supreme Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead. He has no other business. He is always engaged in the glorification of the Lord. In other words, he is not an impersonalist. When the question of glorification is there, one has to glorify the Supreme Lord, praising His holy name, His eternal form, His transcendental qualities, and His uncommon pastimes. One has to glorify all these things. Therefore, a mahātmā is attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who is attached to the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord, the Brahma Jyoti, is not described as a mahātmā in the Bhagavad Gita. He is described in a different way in the next verse. The mahātmā is always engaged in different activities of devotional service, as described in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Hearing and chanting about Vishnu, not a demigod or a human being. That is devotion. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, and Smaranam, remembering Him. Such a Mahatma has firm determination to achieve at the ultimate end the association of the Supreme Lord in any one of the 5 transcendental rasas. To achieve that success, he engages all activities, mental, bodily, and vocal, everything, in the service of the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna. That is called full Krishna consciousness. In devotional service, there are certain activities which are called determined, such as fasting on certain days, like the 11th day of the moon, Ekadashi, and on the appearance day of the Lord. All these rules and regulations are offered by the great acharyas for those who are actually interested in getting admission into the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the transcendental world. The Mahatmas, great souls, strictly observe all these rules and regulations, and therefore they are sure to achieve the desired result. As described in the 2nd verse of this chapter, not only is this devotional service easy, but it can be performed in a happy mood. One does not need to undergo any severe penance and austerity. He can live this life in devotional service, guided by an expert spiritual master, and in any position, either as a householder or a sannyasi or a brahmachari, in any position and anywhere in the world, he can perform this devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus become actually a mahātmā, a great soul. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So Krishna is describing the nature of the Mahatma, as he mentioned in the previous verse, 13th verse. O son of Prita, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. So, previous to this, Krishna has spoken about the asuras. You may recall that he said, Maya Jakshena Prakriti, I think that was, Maya Jakshena Prakriti Suyate Sacharatanam. This is text 10. He says, everything in existence is going on by my supervision. Nothing is happening automatically. When the scientists try to explain what's going on, they get as far as the intricacies of nature, which is one step closer. But what does it mean when you, let's say in medical science, when you analyze the nature of the blood, what is healthy and what is unhealthy, and all of the different chemicals, and there's no end to it, how complicated the human body is, certainly the brain. And then you come to the state where, yes, we know just how this is happening, and this secretion is going on, and it's got to be just the right amount, and the temperature, we know that, it's 98.6. But you're not really describing the intelligence behind it. Any child can see that there are things that are going on in this world that are completely amazing. How is a little bug, say spiders, where do they get the intelligence and to make a spider web repeatedly, and then and then wind it back inside and then again go out? I mean, was that just some kind of accident? Oh, evolution over many, many millions of years, That doesn't explain anything. There's so much intelligence. I remember I used to work and closely associate with the Sariputta Prabhu, probably the highest brain in terms of IQ, whoever joined his movement. Brilliant mathematician and scientist, and he was a humble devotee. And he was part of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. And one of the first things he wrote, I remember this came out, it was one of these. Have you ever seen, like, in the higher levels of mathematics where they'll get? I once went to Chicago University. I attended there for a while. It's almost like an Ivy League school. And I sat in. I didn't, I wasn't enrolled, but I sat in on an advanced math class. They had a set of blackboards. They were actually green. But they moved. You could go on one green board and move that and keep writing on the next one behind it like that. They needed that space in order to, write all these complicated equations. I mean, it's like another language. It's amazing. Sariputta was completely expert with that, very advanced. And he took his by Krishna's arrangement, he specialized in what's called information theory, which means how much information is in a particular unit of space and so forth, and the intricacies that are going on. So his first thesis that was published in his role as the Bhaktivedanta Institute, and Prabhupada's mission in preaching to the scientists and everything could be summed up in this title of this book that came out: Life Comes from Life. Life does not arise automatically from an impersonal chemical soup, that the sun is shining on it, and after millions of years, the things get together and there's a little paramecium in there, and then after another million years, there's an intelligence behind it. And he proved it by this information theory. He said that in the universe, he calculated somehow how much information. In other words, information is just not a random conglomeration of atoms, or when you see a garbage heap, it's not as much information as there is in a building. The building has, there's restrictions how it is and everything. The garbage means it's random. It's just things are just thrown in there. There's no intelligence behind it. So this is a fancy way, this is an advanced way of using the argument by, I think it was St. Thomas Aquinas, who was a very learned theologian, as well as a saint within the Catholic Church back in the Middle Ages. And he had certain proofs for the existence of God. And one of them is this proof, which Prabhupada uses all the time also. Proof for the existence of God by, they can call it information theory. I forget what the technical name is, but it's exactly that things are going on in such a complex way that there must be an intelligence behind it. And as soon as you have an intelligence, you have a person. And that person is God. He knows everything, he's arranged it all. And that's exactly what he says in this verse, text 10. Maya yakshena prakriti suyate sacharasaran. All that means, that Sanskrit, by my supervision, this material nature, prakriti, creates, suyate, manifests, charasaram, the moving and non-moving living entities. Because of this, hetanane nakonteya, jagat viparivartate, the universe is working and moving and functioning. That's what viparivartate means. And then he says, but those who are like demons, he describes them in text 12, but first he says what they do, they deride me because I look like a human being. In other words, saying that God can't be in that human form. He must be some kind of infinite person. At least he has to be very old, right? I mean, that's the idea. He's ancient. So fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the supreme Lord of all that be. Now, why would God, who is the creator and master and controller of everything, who knows everything that happened in the past, everything's happening now, everything in the future. He has these three basic qualities. This is also there in theology: omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. Those three. Why would he appear as a human being? It does seem a little puzzling. Even Brahma was puzzled. If you know Krishna Leela, when Krishna was playing with his cowherd boyfriends, not even a cowherd, he was just a calf herd. They hadn't given them the responsibility for the cows yet. They're training up with the calves. So he's out in the forest. He's playing with the boys. They're wrestling. Sometimes he loses. Then they're having lunch. There was a demon that came, this big snake called Aghasura, which he killed. And then after that, they thought, well, let's have lunch now. So they went to the bank of the Yamuna, and they're sitting there. And Brahma came. He saw the killing of the snake, which is remarkable. Snake means 8 miles long snake. And then he was puzzled, because here's this obviously powerful personality, Krishna, who's now just playing like an ordinary boy. How can that be my creator? Brahma is the first created being in the universe. He's very powerful. He engineers what they call the demiurge in Greek philosophy. He engineers the whole universe. And Brahma knew that he was emanated from the lotus growing from the navel of Garbhodaksha Vishnu. And so he says, this is Narayan. This is Narayan, who's the source of the whole universe. Didn't compute. This little boy with the yogurt and fruit in his hand. So he challenged him. And I'm going to go to the pastime again. But he finally realized, yes, this really is the Lord. Why would he do that? This is the question. Why would Krishna hide all of his majesty and appear like a little boy? We just had Damodar month. So that he's running from his mother in fear because he stole the butter, he broke the yogurt pot. Naughty boy. That's God. What kind of God is that? That's the God who, he controls all of this stuff, but that's not really what he wants to do. That's kind of his day job. Or that's kind of, his official job. He delegates that, actually, to his expansions, like the Vishnus and whatever. But what he likes to do, what he relishes doing, is exchanging in loving exchanges with his dearest devotees. Those who, they're not worshiping him as God out of fear, otherwise he'll punish me, I'll go to hell. No, that's not what he enjoys. He enjoys what we enjoy. The friendship and the laughter and the play and this kind of adventure. And so he hides all that majesty and he appears in his original form as this attractive young boy, all attractive, so beautiful, so clever, so kind, so the 64 qualities he has. And so, therefore, the fools, the mudhas, they deride him when he appears in the human form because they don't know all this. You see? They simply think God can't be like that. Or there's no God, how could this boy be? So he calls them fools, they do not know my transcendental, and then he describes that because of that, all of their efforts at achieving success in this world and happiness are frustrated. Mogasha, baffled in their hopes, in their activities, in their knowledge, and they're in a level of rakshasas, which is man-eaters, and asuras, demons. Because prakriti mohinim shritam. This is a very important phrase. There are different energies of Krishna. The mohinim prakriti, that's the bewildering energy. That's what we call maya, mahamaya. So they've taken shelter, means they are fully under that influence, you see. And because of that, they don't know what is what. They don't even know who they are, that they're spirit souls. What to speak of that there's a God. You completely focused on the material energy as your place of success and enjoyment and everything, and you're completely bewildered, because we're exiles here. We are not. This is not our natural home. We are pure spirit. We're souls. Krishna says that at the beginning of the 2nd chapter. It says, Dehinosman yata dehe komaram yopanam jada. In this body, if we just contemplate, we're passing through different stages. Even in this one body, we're transmigrating. As the soul, as the consciousness, we exist. We all remember we're 10 years old, 12 years old. Maybe you can remember 8, 7, 6, 5. 5 is, pretty rare. But we know that we were alive at that time. We had a different body. We had a different mind, right? But we were the same person. So gradually, we grow, adolescence, adulthood, middle age. Same person, different body. Body's changed, the mind has changed. What hasn't changed? You haven't changed. The soul does not change. That's one of the avakari. No birth, najayate, mriyate, bhajate. I have this little ditty that I wrote. Every single body dies. Who can deny it? Every single body dies. Nobody dies. See? The soul doesn't die. Every single body dies. Nobody dies. Wake up and open your eyes. You're not that body. You're a pure spirit soul. Chant the holy name and attain life's goal. That's the basic philosophy of the Krishna consciousness movement. So, but who can believe in this? One has to be fortunate to come in touch with this transcendental philosophy of Bhagavad Gita and the pure soul, Srila Prabhupada. So Krishna is deriding these fools who deride him, not knowing his real glory. And then he, by the contrary, on the other hand, the mahātmās. In Sanskrit, there's this word tu. It's never at the beginning of a verse. It's always, it means on the other hand, or but. O son of those who are not deluded, however, the great souls, they take shelter of the daivi prakriti. You see the same phrase, but not mohini prakriti, but daivi prakriti. Daivi means divine. It's the same word. They are under the protection of the divine nature. Nature means prakriti. And what is the result? They worship me with one-pointed attention. Bhajanjana manaso. Gyatva bhutadam, understanding that I am the source of all creation, and I'm indestructible, I'm inexhaustible. I never decrease. And what do they do to worship me? And here's where it's an interesting backstory to this verse we just read today. Satatam kirtiyanto mam. Now this word kirtiyanto, that's a familiar word, right? Sankirtan, kirtan, chanting the holy names. Here it is, right in the Bhagavad Gita. Now in the 70s, Prabhupada was preaching, he would sometimes meet university professors, and the devotees would go to the colleges. And oftentimes they'd be in the college quad and they'd do some kirtan, and they would get approach some professor and speak in the classes like that. A lot of preaching in the colleges. A lot of devotees came from there. So one professor, I don't know if he was a religion professor, he saw the devotees chanting. And you can turn it off. And he knew, he had read the Bhagavad Gita, and he said, well, what is this? They're practicing some kind of yoga. What is all this chanting going on? I don't see that in the Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada quoted this verse. Satatam kirtiyanto mam yatantas. They're always chanting. He says, here, it's always chanting. It'll go off automatically. And striving, yatantas, and striving with firm vow, determination. Namasyantasamam, always bowing to me with devotion. In this way, nityayukta upasade, they're always worshipping me. This is the characteristics of the mahātmās, of the great souls. So he's giving by contrast. This is how we learn. This is how we perceive, by the contrast of things in the outline you see. So on one hand, he's describing those who have no faith that there can be a God, even oftentimes atheistic. And if they come in touch with Krishna, they deride him. Mostly they don't say he's an ordinary man. Mostly they say he's a myth. He doesn't exist. He never existed. It was just made up. But then you're faced with, well, how do we explain all that's going on in the universe? In other words, then you come back to the same problem. Unless you understand that there's an intelligence behind everything, that nothing is happening by chance, that there's so much pattern, and then you become curious. What's behind it? Where do I go to find out and explain the incredible balance and the incredible intelligence shown in the workings even of nature? And that questioning is important. Like we have in the Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra means aphorisms that comprise the essence of all knowledge. Veda anta. Veda is knowledge, anta means end or conclusion. So this Vedanta Sutra comprises the essence of all the Vedic wisdom in sutra, aphorism form. That means they need to be explained. And so all the great acharyas, they have their Vedanta Sutra commentary. So the first sutra is Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now, therefore, inquire into Brahman. What is this Brahman? That's described in the next sutra. Janma jasya yataha. We're afraid of that. It falls off there. Hope it's not broken. Yeah, hold on to it. So, what is the source of everything? Unless you understand, then you can't understand what's going on, and you can't understand yourself. So that's a big topic. What is Brahman? And Brahman turns out to be, we're Brahman. The first phrase you learn when you move into the ashram, at least we did, was Aham Brahmasmi. I am pure spirit. Brahman means pure spirit, consciousness, intelligence, you see. And it goes on from there. And so, unless we come to that inquisitiveness, we run the real risk of wasting this rare and invaluable human form of life. Because human life is meant for this inquiry. This is just one form we've had. We've existed in so many other forms. This is the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita. Consciousness is indestructible. Najayate mriyate vākadācana nayam bhūtva bhavita amānabhuya. We are never born and we never die. The only Haribol Bhushanji. Isn't that, in one sense, very encouraging? That we'll never die? I mean, we might not believe it, but once you understand, yes, of course the body will die, but you're not the body. You're not the body. You're the spirit. You're the consciousness within the body. And that consciousness, when it identifies with the body, that's tragic. because it means that we're completely alienated from our actual identity. We don't know who we are. But clearly, when you analyze it, you see, yes, I'm conscious of my body. If I stub my toe, then I know it's my toe. If you stub your toe, I don't know it, until you tell me. But the point is that we have a certain field of activities. It's called that in the 13th chapter, Kshetra. The Kshetra is like a field we have here. Very complicated machine. And it works for a while. We can try to be as healthy as possible and eat right and do all these things and everything. But of course, there's always accidents that happen and so many things. But eventually, for one reason or another, the body will fail. But we will go on. Now, what determines, this is the key, what determines what our next body is going to be? Who can say? Saul, you know this one. What determines what your next body is going to be? Yeah, and your consciousness. How you've developed your consciousness over this lifetime. What you thought about, what you did, what your activities were, what you aspire for. All of that goes into your subtle body. We all have a mind. Does anyone want to say they don't have a mind? But we can't see it. And even finer is the intelligence, that discriminating factor. The mind basically works with the senses. When the senses perceive something that may be desirable, the mind says, yes, let's go for it, and appeals to the intelligence. Figure it out, how we're going to get it. The mind, I like to say the mind has a mind of its own. If you let it go, you have to control it by the intelligence. That's what education is all about, isn't it? Every parent knows if their child just wanders on this, plays in the street and the playground all the time, then he's going to have a hard time in life. You have to be trained. You have to knowledge so that you can succeed. So, but the best knowledge of all is that how we can really make a success completely of our life in this world. And that success is Prabhupada's immortal phrase: we have to go back home, back to Godhead. That phrase is so, I don't want to say pregnant, but you understand what I mean. It's so meaningful. First of all, it says that's where we belong. That's where we came from. The reason why we're having such a hard time in this world, eventually you may say, well, I'm doing okay. And all we can say is, give it time. Give it time. Whether it's some disaster like the Omicron or the pandemic, or some war, or some natural thing, or just old age and disease. Eventually, you can't hold it together here. You fail. You have to leave the body. But you don't die. But the question is, how can we make this our last birth, our last death in a physical body? Is there such a place? Is there such a thing? And that's what Prabhupada is giving us. With such, it's not a question of faith, it's absolute certainty and experience. It's like someone just, comes from, say you never visited New York, or you never visited France, And your friend, first of all, that means that you have faith, says, oh, I'm going to be able to go visit my friends. My parents were able to buy me a ticket, so when I get back, I'll tell you about it. And they go there, and of course now they take so many photographs with their cell phone, and even when they're there, they send them back to you. So, when they come back, say, of course you believe there is such a place as France. I have faith in my friend. They send me the pictures, and look, they just learned how to cook this and that and this. And they have a whole, valise full of perfumes or something. I don't know, whatever it means that they went to France. And so you know more about the world than you did before. They can tell you all kinds of interesting. Maybe they learned some French, Okay, but what if that person that you're meeting, who is your best friend, and the great devotees are the best friends of all, is that I'm going to tell you about a whole other world. That where there's no death, there's no birth. It's Satchidananda. And that's our real home. Well, this is, okay, we have our doubts, we want to understand it. And I'm going to give you a means by which you can also go there forever. Now, you think, well, if this is true, this is my best friend. Otherwise, he's trying to con me, But Prabhupada said, here, take the mantra, Hare Krishna. We're not selling it. He was I was there, at the time they were selling mantras for $25, $30, which is a lot more money in the 70s than it is now. Now it's $1,000, And they give you one syllable. It's a ripoff. It's a ripoff. Prabhupada gave the mantra for free. Come, everyone chant. He's going out in the park and giving it for free. The most valuable thing. The most valuable thing in the universe, the holy name. You know, some of the expressions glorifying the holy name, it's appropriate here to talk about that. It's Satatam Kirtayantama. By our great acharyas, there's one verse that Sanatana Goswami writes near the beginning of his great book called the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. This book was published, translated by my dear friend Gopi Puranatana Prabhu, who's gone now 11 years. And he was a great Sanskrit scholar, and he translated this book, which is the first of the books of the Goswamis, before Rupa Goswami wrote and Jiva Goswami. It's called the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Amrita means the nectar of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the essence of the Bhagavatam. So in the beginning, as they often do, they write introductory verses that describe the subject matters like that, introduction. So one of the verses describes the holy name, how he's experiencing the holy name. And so he says, Jayati Jayati Namananda Rupam Morare Vidamita Nij Dharma Dhyana Pujadi Yatnam Sakadapi Padigitam Shraddhya Heliyava. No, that's a different verse. Katamapi Sakadatam Muktidam Pranayam Yat Padamamamritamekam Jivanam Bhushanam Me. It's such a wonderful verse. It says, oh glories to the holy name of Murari. Murari is the name of Krishna, means the enemy of the Mura demon. He killed the demon called Mura once. Namananda Rupam, the very form of bliss. He's experiencing like that. Just to chant Krishna, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, and he's feeling so much pleasure. Vidamita Nijadharma. By chanting this, one gives up all materialistic duties in the world, meditation, dry meditation, worshipping the deities. You see, all of this is beside the point now. Just let me chant Hare Krishna. And if someone somehow or other chants the name even once, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say chant once. You can't chant once. Chant means to repeat. If someone utters the holy name even once, like a Jamil, Narayan, then it will liberate him from birth and death. Padamam Amrita Mekam, it is my supreme and soul nectar. Jivanam Bhushan, my very life, my ornament, and my everything. He's saying about this holy name. There's been a lot of commentary on it. And there's so many verses. This is how they're actually experiencing it. They're not advertising. There's no reason for them to do that. They're so renounced. They live on nothing. They're not trying to sell you anything. They're trying to save you, trying to encourage you to take this free gift and worship it and chant properly and purely so that you'll also experience. This is Satatam Kirtayantamam. That's what they're always chanting. And so this is the way out. In this age especially, the means, the method is the chanting of the holy name. And it's absolutely free and anyone can do it. But there is an art to do it properly, successfully. And that's why we need association of great devotees through their books and their activities, how we can chant successfully. Because as in any discipline, we're trying to train the mind and also train the body to be free from the illusions and from the imprisonment of the material energy. And so we're trying to go from the Mohini Prakriti to the Daivi Prakriti. Now we're completely affected and infected by the bewildering energy, Krishna's Maya energy, which convinces us, yes, you are the body, try to please the senses as much as possible, and try to get as much material as possible, and all of these thoughts in the lower modes of nature, and we become trapped by that. And then what happens? What determines our next body? The state of our consciousness in this body, when we leave it. When we leave it. And if we don't have systematically trained our mind to think of Krishna, then how can we think Krishna at the time of death? It won't be possible. But if you are able to remember him, then that will take you to the spiritual world. This is what we're told. So, this is the nature of the great souls. They're always glorifying Krishna. Prabhupada showed that in spades, whether he's typing with 2 fingers and writing his books, which he did in the 60s and 70s, and then he got some help. I was very fortunate to help him, one of the devotees, in the editing. and electronics and all these things. He could dictate, and it became faster. But he's always glorifying the Lord with great determination and vow, and always staying humble and worshiping, bowing down to Krishna with great love and devotion, and in this way always linked to Krishna. So he's pouring out on these pages of the Bhagavad Gita and all his books the truth of who is the Lord, who we are, what is the relationship, how can we reawaken that and perfect our lives, go back home, back to Godhead. So we have time for either questions, or we can read another verse, or discussion, doubts. Manoram, you have it. I'm sorry? You would like to do another verse? Okay. All right. Here we go with text 15. So now these are others beside the Mahatmas. Jnana yajnana chapyam ye yajanto mam upasate ekatvena pitatvena bahuda vishvato mukham. Others, besides the Mahatmas, who engage in sacrifice by the cultivation of knowledge, worship the Supreme Lord as the one without a second, as diverse in many, and in the universal form. Purport. This verse is the summary of the previous verses. The Lord tells Arjuna that those who are purely in Krishna consciousness and do not know anything other than Krishna are called Mahatmas. Yet there are other persons who are not exactly in the position of Mahatma, but who worship Krishna also, in different ways. Some of them have already been described as the distressed, the financially destitute, the inquisitive, and those who are engaged in the cultivation of knowledge. But there are others who are still lower, and these are divided into three. 1, he who worships himself as one with the Supreme Lord. 2, he who concocts some form of the Supreme Lord and worships that. And 3, he who accepts the universal form, the Vishwarup of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and worships that. Out of the above 3, the lowest, those who worship themselves as the Supreme Lord, thinking themselves to be monists, are most predominant. Such people think themselves to be the Supreme Lord, and in this mentality they worship themselves. This is also a type of God worship, for they can understand that they are not the material body, but are actually spiritual soul. At least such a sense is prominent. Generally, the impersonalists worship the Supreme Lord in this way. The second class includes the worshippers of the demigods, those who by imagination consider any form to be the form of the Supreme Lord. And the third class includes those who cannot conceive of anything beyond the manifestation of this material universe. They consider the universe to be the supreme organism or entity and worship that. The universe is also a form of the Lord. So this is people who are understand that there's a Supreme, but they really don't know how to worship Him in such a way that He'll reveal Himself more and more in His personal form. This worship of the universal form is actually sometimes touted as the first step in God realization. Because if you're not able to see or conceive of God as a quote human being or in a two-handed form, personal form, then you can look at the universe. I remember I flew in. I used to do some more traveling, and I was coming in, I think, to Phoenix or something, and I was looking out at all this desert, and just the lay of the land, the geology. You could see the forces that that had formed the land like that. And I thought of the universal form, how the mountains are the bones of Krishna, and the sun is the eye of God. It's very kind of awe-inspiring, and in this way one can perceive the divine everywhere. Because where is there not the universal form? And a little of that we have in the 7th chapter, where Krishna says, okay, I am the light of the sun and the moon, I'm the taste of water, I'm the fragrance of the earth. He's giving us telling us experiences we have every day, drinking water, but when you taste that water, I am that taste. Why? Because I'm the one who created your tongue, I am the one who created the water, and that very sense of taste is also created by me. So in this way, we begin to sanctify our vision and our life. And we don't fall into that complete illusion that there's no God, everything is just an accident or is a field for me to try to enjoy. That there's connection everywhere. The divine is connected everywhere. What is this? What is this? Matter that we're seeing here as the temple? It's built out of stone, earth, bhumi, and there's some fire, and the electricity is there. There's water's going through the pipe. It's earth, water, fire, air, ether. There's got to be a space for it, right? And so that's the apara prakriti. That is the lower energy Krishna speaks of in the 7th chapter. So when you begin to see the world that way, and you begin to see yourself that way, then what should we do? Well, we should act in such a way that we stay connected. We stay connected to the Lord, and we try to, instead of pleasing our own senses, we try to please the senses of Krishna. That's the essence of bhakti. And we find that when we do that, we become much more peaceful and happy and satisfied. Especially when we do it together, like a kirtan. Last night we had a nice program here in glorifying the Gita. We sang chapter 9 of the Gita, which is so wonderful. And then we had a kirtan, we had a nice feast, and it was all Radha Giridhari were there blessing everything. This is real life. Everyone had a great time. Nobody drank even a drop of wine or anything like that. Nobody smoked anything abominable. Wholesome, because this is our natural tendency, and this is what Lord Chaitanya gave and what Srila Prabhupada is giving. So these are others who are also inclined to transcendence, but they don't quite have the understanding of the Supreme Personality of the Absolute. All right, now Krishna is saying why this is so foolish, and in text 16. Aham katuraham yagya swadaham hamaushadam mantroham hamevajyam aham agnir aham mutam. Okay, so they're engaging in sacrifice in the cultivation of knowledge, so this is talking about the sacrifices. But it is I who am the ritual, I the sacrifice, the offering to the ancestors, the healing herb, the transcendental chant. I am the butter and the fire and the offering. Purport: the Vedic sacrifice known as Jyotishtoma is also Krishna, and he is also the Mahajagya mentioned in the Smriti. The oblations offered to the Pitriloka, or the sacrifice performed to please the Pitriloka, considered as a kind of drug in the form of clarified butter, is also Krishna. The mantras chanted in this connection are also Krishna, and many other commodities made with milk products for offering in the sacrifice are also Krishna. The fire is also Krishna because fire is one of the 5 material elements, and is therefore claimed as the separated energy of Krishna. In other words, the Vedic sacrifices recommended in the Karma Kanda division of the Vedas are in total also Krishna. Or in other words, those who are engaged in rendering devotional service unto Krishna are to be understood to have performed all the sacrifices recommended in the Vedas. Okay, so we'll resume there tomorrow. And now I've left a little time for a little poem. If it's okay, Bhusha? Okay. So this is a poem describing, I've often chant this one. This one is uttered by Lord Chaitanya to Sanatana Goswami in the Madhya Lila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He's teaching him, and the most voluminous teachings are to Sanatana Goswami. There's several chapters there. And when he begins speaking about the practice of devotional service, there's the Sambandha Videya Prayojana, these different... Sambandha means understanding who I am, what this world is, what the relationship is between ourselves and all this. And once you understand, then you act to realize the knowledge, and that's called Abhideya. And so the most famous practice of which is chanting Hare Krishna. So here he's introducing that, and he's saying, with this verse, and it has to do with purifying the intelligence. So he says, Kama dinang katina katita palita durnideshas tesham jata mayana karuna natrapano prashantihi Utsrijayata nati yotopate sampratam labdha buddhis tvamayata kshadanam abhayam mam niyung svatmadasye. In how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires. They've shown me no mercy. Yet on I have gone shamelessly trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires. But now I'm rejecting these hellish desires, for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. So this is really the essence of the whole thing, to turn away from the bewildering energy which we've been trying to dominate and enjoy forever, and turn toward the internal energy of Krishna, Ladini Shakti, the pleasure energy. And we find that if we really try to connect with Krishna in service and sincerity, and then we lose a certain pleasure comes out of that. It's called transcendental pleasure. And that negates the attraction of the material energy to enjoy. The wonderful verse by the Kumaras, the 4 Kumaras, they're part of the Mahajans, the great souls who know the science of bhakti, and they travel around the universe. They look like little children, but they're actually millions of years old, and they're full of knowledge, and they're preaching to Maharaj Prithu, and this is one of the verses they chant. I don't have a poem for it, but I'll explain. Yat pada pangaja palasha vilasa bhaktya karmashayang gritam udgatayanti santa tadvanna riktam atayo yatayopi ruddha sroto ganasthamananam bhaja vasudevam. You should worship Vasudeva. So he says, those devotees who are tasting the pleasure of serving the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. Pada pangaja palasa vilasa. Vilasa is spiritual pleasure. Karmashayam gratitam udgatayanti santa. These santas, saints, the same word as we're here. It's San Diego. It's the same word, saint. These saints, the devotees, their karmashayam, their hopes and aspirations for material pleasure, which are like knots in the heart, they're completely cut and untied. In other words, they become free of the impetus to enjoy matter because they're tasting the wonderful nectar, pleasure of serving Krishna. So by contrast, tadvanna riktamatayo, those whose minds are devoid of bhakti, the jnanis, the yogis, the karmis, the ordinary people, even though the first two, they may try like anything to control the senses, eventually they're overwhelmed with some kind of material desire and they can't maintain it. Because we're enjoying beings, we're part and parcel of Krishna. Either we're going to enjoy with Krishna under the guidance and the shelter of the Daivi Prakriti, the Ladini Shakti of Krishna, or we're going to try to enjoy under the influence of the Mohini Prakriti, bewildering energy, Maya, and suffer for it. That's our choice. So we just need to train how we can taste that nectar at every step by serving Krishna. And we'll become completely happy and peaceful. And at the end, go back home, back to Godhead. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Now let's see the beautiful deities and we'll chant Hare Krishna.